Mark liked to work with a lot of test screenings, and I'm sure a lot of you do test screenings too. This was a bit of a challenge when, like, our editor, fantastic editor, lived on a small island off the coast of Vancouver. We had to keep flying footage to her in a seaplane, and we had, as I say, over 100 hours of material. So our first assembly was something like 18 hours long, which is a bit of a bit of a commitment for people to actually sit down and watch. So the first person who watched it, I remember, it took a day and a half to watch the whole thing, and there were almost tears in his eyes at the end. But you know, each person who agreed to come to a test screening would watch the film, fill out a form, get into a discussion, and talk about, you know, what worked for them and what didn't. And part of this process was finding, and this also goes back to the research stage before we started shooting. This was a film meant to last, and I don't think I really realized the impact of that until now, when somehow it's still being seen and referenced, which is quite nice. So some of the stories that we picked, there's a Bolivian water story, for example. A lot of people who are sort of, you know, who we knew were in the more activist realm knew about that. They go, oh, that's an old story. You know, that's an old story. You know, we've heard about it time and time again. Even the growth hormone story is a relatively old story. But the idea was to pick the best stories we could, so that we can make our point as clearly as we could, and also in hopes that, you know, not everybody's of that kind of activist ilk. So, you know, hopefully that will reach to a larger audience, and since the stories we think are the best stories, it will last over a period of time. So part of the feedback screening process was to find which stories were really not working, even though that we thought they were the best ones, which just didn't have that same flow, which ones needed more explanation than we had time for, even given our gigantic running time, et cetera, et cetera. So we invited filmmakers, non-filmmakers, academics, et cetera, to nobody who's actually in the film, of course, just to kind of give us an idea of what it is that we were succeeding at and what we weren't. Any questions on that? No? Excellent, okay. Pardon me.
Back to that kind of 18 hours cut, sorry, Bart.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you expect from it? Because, I mean, you might as well give your ashes.
Well, this was to a small audience of one, right? There was Mark's previous collaborator who had worked on Manufacturing Consent with him was invited in, and a handful of other people. I think it was because this film, I might not have mentioned it before, but it was started in 2007. I came on board in late 2008, initially as production manager, and then grew into producer as the film went on. You know, everybody had been involved with the film for so long by that point. September 11th had happened, and that ended up canceling a lot of our interviews for obvious reasons. A lot of the CEOs said, look, I can't do this right now. I've got other things I have to worry about. So that pushed our schedule. The whole film took about 6 years to make. Well, 7 really. So by this point, 2002, everybody was really starting to hit their head against the wall as to, you know, let's see what we have, what do we still have to shoot, et cetera, et cetera. So for a few people, 18 hours was not a bad idea in my point of view, at least the way that Mark was used to working and Jennifer. So.
What do you test in 18 hours?
It's the types of stories, really. It's the types of stories. It's who's working. There might be somebody who's a terrific speaker, who's not, you know, contributing at the same level just because of the nature of what they're talking about with another person. We were also very conscious about trying to include a variety of people, men, women, people of color, et cetera, just to try and get a big thing. And one of the criticisms we had when we released the film was you got a lot of white guys in there, which is a valid note, but the unfortunate thing about our society is that a lot of CEOs are white guys. So, you know, yeah, you have to, yeah. So we just had to say that's a valid concern, and you know, this is the situation. But yeah, it's just trying to find out who was really working and who wasn't. And I think by that point, everybody had been working so much on individual stories and everything, we just wanted to make sure that we were going down the right path.
But is there not another way to test?
Probably, yeah, probably. You know, by transcripts, by, you know, the filmmakers kind of sequestering themselves for a bit longer.
Different
Yeah, could do. I wish I had an answer for you. I mean, basically the thing is like this is this was the decision that worked. What's that?
You're not selling it.
I'm not advertising for it. I'm just saying this is what happened, and it was a for the particular way that the directors worked, it was ultimately useful because they got some decent feedback out of it, and the nice 18 hours person will forever live on in our memory as a kind person.